Coming up on this episode, after a season full of lineup concerns, the Warriors have more starting five issues ahead of a game against the Grizzlies on Wednesday night. Yes, welcome back to the Golden State with Mates podcast. I apologise. I wanted to do an episode after the Knicks loss, but I've been a little bit busy, and that means that this episode is coming now. We've got 5 hours to go until the Warriors face the Grizzlies on Wednesday night at Chase Center. Going back to that Knicks game on Monday, the Warriors suffered a 119-112 defeat. Very disappointing. That's. I mean, I'm not even angry. I'm not even mad at this point. I think it's just further reality of where the Warriors are at this season, who they are this season, and I think they themselves feel it as well. Steve said after the game, we were simply outplayed, and just kind of reiterated that fact. And Steph was going on about, if we're going to play like this, then it doesn't matter what seed we get, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, doesn't matter. We're not going to be doing anything come the postseason anyway. So I think just full of disappointment, because that is a game against the Knicks outfit without Julius Randle, their second leading scorer, second best offensive player, without OG Anunoby, who's their best defensive player. The Knicks are shorthanded, and you just should be winning that game. It's simple as that on your home floor, as they did at MSG just a couple of weeks ago. They beat the Knicks there 110-99, and that was a real rock solid performance against a shorthanded team, and they were able to get it done. And on Monday night, unfortunately, it was just the complete opposite. The Warriors really played in spurts, really. Like, they had their runs, they had their moments throughout the game, but they started without scoring for practically the first 4 minutes. The Knicks started on an 8-0 run, and the Warriors never led after that. And again, they just played in spurts and never played without the sustained momentum and execution to beat a Knicks team who, yes, are very short-handed, that is for sure, but they're also incredibly well drilled. They play incredibly hard. Tom Thibodeau loves to play his guys big minutes. As we saw, Josh Hart did not miss a second of that game. Miles McBride had a career-high night, 29 points, played all but 90 seconds of the game. And so when you're coming up against a team like that, you might have more talent on paper, but you've still got to go out there and execute. You've still got to go out and play at an intensity for all 4 quarters, and the Warriors simply failed to do that. So, yes, they might have been the more talented team on the night, but they didn't play hard enough to get the win. And so it was just disappointing given the position they are in, and they slide back to 10th in the Western Conference now, and I've given up pretty much all hope on getting a top 8 seed. It's, they're actually a little bit at risk. I think they're only 2.5 games in front of the Rockets, who are in 11th now. So they're actually a little bit at risk of not even making the 10 seed, which is, I have no words. It's incredibly disappointing, but it is what it is, and they're just going to have to, hopefully, do you want to get into 9 right now? Because they are clearly a better road team than they are a home team. So you might want to stay in 10th and have to go to crypto and try to beat the Lakers again in LA, and then win another road game against whoever loses the 7-8 game. I don't know. That might be the plan at this point. Obviously, they'll want to get 9 and get home court advantage, but I don't know what's going on with their record at Chase Center this season. They've now got a losing record there. I don't know what you can put it down to. I don't think it's anything in particular. I don't. For some teams, they do, gel better on the road. You get an opportunity to get away with your teammates. Potentially the chemistry builds a little bit more when you've got a tough road trip or whatever else. Maybe that's the case. I don't know, but it's very disappointing. There's not much else that can be said about that. But I think when Monday night's game really proved that the Warriors still have some concerns with the starting lineup, and that's what I wanted to kind of go through today. This is a lineup that the Warriors obviously kind of formed just before the All-Star break, when Clay went back to the bench for pods and started playing next to Steph. Wiggs has kind of obviously been in and out, but he's, over the last few weeks, aside from that 4-game absence he's had, that he's really been the starting small forward for the majority. And then JK obviously developing himself into a starting caliber player and the starting power forward. And then Draymond obviously is the center, kind of unlocking that front court trio. So this has kind of been the lineup the Warriors have gone with primarily over the last few weeks. Obviously, the Wiggs absence, Steph out for a few games, things change. But this is a lineup that's worked pretty productively for the Warriors and helped them get to the best stretch of their season. And even to this point, in the 193 minutes they've played together, they do have a net rating of 12.9, I think it is, which is good. But a lot of that comes from the early part when that starting lineup was first formed, and the last few games here, and particularly Monday against the Knicks, where they were outscored by 20 in 11 minutes together. There's some issues. There's clearly some issues. And I just wanted to go through a few here and potentially what the Warriors could do, whether it's later today against the Grizzlies or going forward here over the last 15 games of the season. Not only that, but actually into next season as well, because as I've been saying for a few episodes here, the Warriors need to have probably one eye on next season and looking at their young guys and what they could potentially bring to the table next season and beyond. So I want to start with Andrew Wiggins. This was a deplorable game from Andrew Wiggins. This was reminiscent of Wiggs early in the season, completely non-existent. 7 points, 2 of 9 shooting. You look at the box score and think, oh, okay, he had 8 rebounds. At least he was active on the glass. No, he wasn't. He just wasn't. He padded his rebounding stats because he missed the layup and then had to tip the ball in 3 times to finally put it in. And that was one of his baskets, and it came off 3 or 4 offensive rebounds. So that rebounding that's not 8 rebounds. That's missing a layup and having to tip the ball 3 or 4 times. He was not active at all in any means. Jalen Brunson was obviously dominant throughout the game. Wiggs, didn't really do a whole lot to be able to stop him there. Brunson went for a game high 34 points. Yes, shot the ball. I think he was 12 of 25 shooting. Wasn't great, but he was still the dominant player on the floor. So. Andrew Wiggins. This is the quote that really got me from Steve yesterday, right? Which I just shook my head at. So Steve, on 95.7 the game yesterday, said, "We want Andrew to be more aggressive. I think the more aggressive he is looking for his shot, the better. I think sometimes Andrew gets lost in the shuffle. So I think I've got to do a better job of keeping him engaged and really getting him in positions to attack and to be successful." Right. The guy's on a $110 million contract. He's a former number 1 overall pick. He was an all-star 2 years ago. Second best player in a championship less than 2 years ago. In what way do we need to keep this guy engaged? You are a professional basketball player. It should not be up to your coach to keep you engaged. And if it is up to the coach to keep you engaged, you better be a role player who's playing 10 to 15 minutes off the bench, not the starting small forward who your team is largely relying upon to be an impactful two-way presence and play 30 minutes a game. That is mind-boggling to me, that the coach needs to keep you engaged. Really? Really? Because to me, Wiggs, yes, needs to be aggressive, but he's not a guy that Steve should be looking at and think, geez, we need to get this guy going, so we're going to give him, 3-4 possessions in the first few minutes where he can really get it going. Because he's not that guy. Okay, you look at the starting lineup. Steph and JK are your 2 guys. They should be your priority. They should be the guys that you are getting going early. And you should not be looking at Andrew Wiggins as, we've lost, he's been lost in the shuffle a bit. I need to keep him engaged. So let me get him a couple of post-ups early, or let me get him, an action to get a wide open 3 or whatever it is. I don't know. That just sums up Andrew Wiggins to me and his season. The fact that Steve, 67 games through the season with 15 games to go with the team battling to make the playoffs, and you're thinking about whether you need to keep your starting small forward engaged or not, and you think he's been lost in the shuffle. Shouldn't be happening. Should not be happening to any professional NBA player, let alone a guy who's on a $110 million contract, let alone a guy who is not a role player or a bench player by any means. He's not playing 10 to 15 minutes a game. His role doesn't depend on who he's coming up against on what night. This is a guy that has consistently played 25 to 30 minutes a game, that the Warriors desperately need his impact. And so to me, that's appalling. He's not wrong though. He's not wrong, because the game we saw from Wiggs on Monday night was a very unactive, non-existent game. And he has these spurts where he can go 5-6 minutes on the floor and you don't actually notice him out there. And that's always been the issue back to his Timberwolves days. Right. And now he's in a team that is, yes, more successful than obviously those Minnesota years, but it's also meant for him that instead of being a 1 or 2 option, he's now a 3 or 4 option, probably a 4 option if you include, Clay coming off the bench. And he's got to rediscover a way to be impactful on both ends of the floor while not being that, first or second guy, and not necessarily saying or playing in a manner that, says, well, I'm not the first or second guy, so I'm just going to waltz around here, not do a whole lot. The coach thinks he needs to keep me engaged and thinks I've been lost in the shuffle. That's just an excuse to me. That's an excuse for poor performance. And fair credit to Steve. He's putting his hand up and he's trying to ease the pressure on Wiggs. And that's what a good coach does. A good coach puts his hand up and says, yeah, I need to take responsibility for this. But he doesn't. This is on Wiggs to remain engaged, to play up to the level that his contract suggests. And, this is the great thing about American sport. I'll tell you quickly, this is the great thing about American sport because the AFL has just started back up a couple of weeks ago. My team, Collingwood, 0-2 start, absolutely appalling. But in Australian sport, because we obviously don't make as much money as those in American sport, NBA, NFL, NHL, MLB, whatever, contracts are not public. So you have to pretty much try and guess what a player is on, and obviously reporters and journos will speculate on, player signs a new contract or signs a contract in free agency, whatever else. They'll speculate on what that player is earning, how many years, what money. But it makes it really difficult in the AFL, and it's also a bit more difficult because there's 22 guys that play each week on a team. But it's hard to somewhat evaluate performance because I often base performance relative to what the expectations are, and what the expectations are largely based around what you're earning financially, which I think at the professional level is fair enough. The great thing about the NBA is contracts are widely known. Player signs X contract in free agency, we all know about it. I can go on Spotrac and see what any NBA player is making this season and beyond. And that's fantastic, I think, because it gives you the opportunity to evaluate someone's performance based on what they're earning and therefore what the expectations are. And Andrew Wiggins simply isn't meeting those expectations right now. And I think it's very fair to bring up the fact that, hey, you are on a $110 million contract, a contract that at the time we thought was probably a team-friendly deal, having come off the 2022 season where he was second best player in the championship and an all-star player. So, I don't know, like how long can you go with this? He obviously had a good stretch before the trade deadline, which meant the Warriors kept him. And at the time, I thought that was the right decision, given how low his value had gotten from a trade standpoint. But if he finishes the season in any similar manner to how he performed on Monday against the Knicks, he'll be gone in the offseason. He will be gone. Whether that's obviously trying to find an upgrade, which is probably, hopefully, the biggest thing and the priority, but potentially for a team trying to get under the second tax apron, that's just a way of getting off money. Now, obviously, the Warriors have plenty of avenues to do that with CP3. Clay, obviously, coming back on a lesser number. The Warriors will have flexibility there. But I couldn't be more disappointed with how Andrew Wiggins played on Monday night. He's had a lot of bad games this season, but that was up there with just a really, really bad game. And just super disappointed in him, to be honest, because I think it's up to him. I don't think it's a Steve thing. I don't think it's a teammate thing. Yeah, he's got to be better. Second one, Kuminga. So this entire season, I've been incredibly positive on JK, and rightly so, because he is, with 15 games to go in the season, he is the bright spot of this Warriors season, right? He is the best thing to have come from this. And it's weird because the Warriors are in a bit of a weird, and I've spoke about this on recent episodes, but the Warriors are in a bit of a weird spot because if you just look at the results of this season and see they're 10th in the Western Conference, then that is really, really disappointing. It's woeful. It's horrible. You would think, yeah, major changes need to be made. But given the impact of the young guys, given the growth of JK, how Pods has played in his rookie season, TJD now has been huge. So there is some positivity and optimism from the young guys about what the Warriors could do next season and beyond, rather than necessarily just looking at the final results, which have them now 10th in the Western Conference, and thinking, wow, mass changes need to be made, which may be made and may need to be made anyway. But I think there is a little bit of a different outlook on it with how the young guys have performed. But for me, I think JK's got to a point where we actually need to be tough on him, where you need to look at him as, okay, you've proven yourself as a guy who's capable of scoring 20 points a night. You've proved that to us. You've grown into that player. However, what else can you do for me now? Will that actually contribute to winning basketball and winning games? Will that contribute to that? Or are you an empty calories guy who is getting his points but isn't necessarily contributing to winning, isn't doing all the other little things that you need to do? Because I can tell you right now, if Jonathan Kuminga is a 20-point per game scorer and that's it, cool. Guess what? There's 30, 40 guys in the league can do that. Dime a dozen player. Now, how he does it might be a bit different in terms of the rim pressure and his downhill force. That's absolutely elite. I get that. But how many guys in this league average 20? A heap. It's not special. It really isn't. It's not special to average 20 points a game in the NBA these days. In the modern NBA, with as talented as it is, it's not special. And so for him to be a truly special player, like, what have you got to do? You got to show me something else. And having one rebound on Monday night against the Knicks is flat out disastrous. It's inexcusable is how I coined it on my article for Blue Man Hoop. Inexcusable to have one rebound in, what did he play? Nearly 26, 27 minutes, whatever it was. And he actually got benched over the last 5 minutes. And you know what? I don't mind it, because if anything, it should just be telling him, hey, you can't have one rebound in that amount of playing time. And this is not a singular thing as well. Over his last 5 games, I think he's had something like 13 or 14 rebounds in 150 minutes of play. We've seen your elite athleticism. Clay has labelled you as potentially the best athlete in the NBA. It's also not a physical thing, because if you go back to the one rebound he had against the Knicks on Monday, the one solitary rebound, it was a huge rebound over Draymond and a couple of Knicks players. Like, he used his athleticism to go sky high for the rebound. It's not a physical thing. It's clearly a mental thing for him as well. And I think this is the next development in his game, is to realize, hey, yeah, I want to be able to get buckets. I want to be a go-to guy in this league. Absolutely, that's fine. You've proven capable of that. But in order to actually win in this league, in order to grow your stature, in order to form a legacy, you've actually got to do more than that. And you got to do the things that, aren't necessarily going to be shined upon by the media. The media doesn't look at Jonathan Kuminga after the game and think, oh, yeah, guy had 6-7 rebounds. What a job. Perfect. Amazing. What a guy. What a player. No, they might do that if you score 25 points. But those 6 or 7 rebounds might be just as important for the Warriors in terms of winning the game as the 25 points are. And to have one rebound is flat out inexcusable. And he's capable. He's had 4 games with double-digit rebounds this season. So he's capable of being a high-level rebounder. But I think right now he uses his elite athleticism, one of the best athletes in the league, to be a high-level scorer, but one that is, again, if you're a 20-point per game scorer, there's 30 or 40 of them in the league. There's quite a few. He's doing that right now, but he's not using his elite athleticism to be a high-level rebounder. And he's really not doing it to be a consistent defender at this stage as well. Now, again, in fairness to him, the guy's 21 years of age. He's got so much time to grow, but at the same time, the Warriors kind of need him to be doing this stuff now if they want to be any chance of making the playoffs and going on any kind of run. So again, it's a hard balance between what the Warriors need right now and also trying to be patient and trying to give him time to develop all aspects of his game. So the one rebound is totally inexcusable from JK on Monday. And I don't know, hopefully he can respond against the Grizzlies today. Brandon Pajemski is the other one. And this is the big one in terms of potentially having to make a shift, because I don't think Wicks or JK should be going anywhere in terms of the starting lineup. I think they're too important. Pods are scoring. The lineup works when he is a consistent and capable scorer and shooter. Right. But he's had 8 points or less in 7 of his last 10 games. And he has to be a scorer for this lineup to work, because if he's not, then you've got the same issue as what you had with Draymond and Loon. And why that became untenable is because Draymond and Loon were two non-scorers, two non-shooters who just placed too much of a burden on the Warriors offensively to continue with. And yes, Pods gives you a much more capable three-point threat than Loon does. But if he's still not going to be a scoring threat, if he's still going to give you less than 8 points a game, then you're really running into the same issue. And he had donuts against the Knicks in 25 minutes. 0 points. 0 points in 25 minutes. And so I know that it's not about scoring for him, that he impacts the game in so many other ways, as Loon did, right? When he was at his best as the starting five. Never a scorer, but a guy who could impact rebounding, defending, whatever else. And Pods does that. But at some point, he's also still got to be able to get his own buckets, or at least sit in the corner or on the wing and knock down some open threes, because defenses are going to give him that. And he can't be passing up those shots, and he's got to be making those shots. And if he's not, then you have to seriously question whether the starting lineup will work at all. And if he's going to be a non-scorer and Draymond's going to be a non-scorer, then that just puts too much pressure for me on Steph and on JK. And it can work, right? Like, it can work because Steph is an otherworldly offensive player and JK's turned himself into a 20-point per game scorer. However, if one of those two have an off night, then the offense is just going to get bogged down. And that's what we saw. Right, there's too much pressure on those two guys if Draymond and Pods are non-scorers. Too much pressure. So Steph has an off night like he did against the Knicks, it's not going to work. And JK was efficient, yes, but didn't bring the other elements of his game to the table either. So it won't work, because then you've got Wiggs. Like, if Wiggs could step up, then yeah, the lineup might work. But again, part of the reason why Draymond and Loon didn't work at the start of the season was because of Wiggs and his poor form. And at this point, we've got over 12 months now of Andrew Wiggins being really inconsistent and being untrustworthy as a guy that, you can go into a game and expect 15 points out of. You can't expect that anymore. Just, that's the reality. But you shouldn't necessarily have to, so long as Pods becomes a reasonable, at least 10-point per game scorer himself. Or if you make that shift again, which is now what I'll get into in terms of what can you change. Before I start, I do think that we'll see this lineup against the Grizzlies tonight. And we might see it for the next few games going forward, because on the whole, since they have formed this starting lineup, they have been pretty good. And so maybe jumping off it after one really, really bad game and, a couple of bad games before that, maybe that's a bit of an overreaction. So I do think Steve will give them at least 2 or 3 more games to try and figure this out. However, if you were going to make a change, what do you do? The easiest and most obvious thing is Clay back to the starting 2-guard spot for Pods. That's the easiest and obvious one. And I don't want to say I was right by any means, because I haven't necessarily been right. Clay's been really good off the bench, but the whole fact of it before he moved to the bench was, I repeatedly said, the Warriors need his scoring and need specifically his shooting in the starting lineup. Not necessarily for him personally, but for everyone around him, for Steph and the space that opens up for him, for JK and the space that opens up for him, for Draymond even and the space that it opens up for him. It impacts everyone, right? When you've got Clay out there, it impacts everyone. And when you've got Pods out there as a guy that opposing defenses will sag off of, that also impacts everyone negatively, right? So it's about evaluating that aspect and the spacing, as opposed to what Pods brings to the table in terms of his rebounding, defending, hustle plays, ability to draw charges, whatever else that Clay doesn't bring. Because at this point, Clay is he is what he is. He's a 3-point sniper, very occasional, put the ball on the floor and create his own shot, but very occasional. And so what do you value more? And that's what the Warriors are going to have to try and evaluate here. But if Pods can't be the guy who makes a 3 or 2 every game, and becomes a guy that you can rely on to have at least 10 points, then I think you'll find very quickly that Clay will probably have to come back into the starting lineup. And so that's the easiest and obvious move to make. Then you've got the issue with Draymond, and he's questionable for this game against the Grizzlies with a back concern. And so how much of that is down to the fact that he's being asked to play center? I spoke about this a couple episodes ago. And then TJD, who was excellent against the Knicks, potentially the Warriors' best player, maybe alongside Clay, against New York. And he's actually showing that he is probably capable of being a starting level player against most teams in this league right now, if you need him to be. That's the kind of production he's putting up. And so do you say, well, the Draymond experiment is unsustainable, so we need to go back to a genuine starting 5, and therefore TJD is our man? Potentially, but then that has so much more impact on everyone else, because who goes back to the bench in that scenario? Is it Wiggs? Is it JK? I actually think long term it'll probably be Draymond. Like we've seen a way. I was really at the start of the season I was questioning kind of Draymond's role, and if you'd asked me at the start of the season who would move back to the bench first out of Draymond and Clay, I would have actually said Draymond, because I saw JK as a guy coming up who would very, very soon and very quickly require a starting spot, and that obviously Draymond as the 4, JK as a 4, that was kind of the easy switch to be made there. Obviously, they've now found a way to start both of them with Draymond at center, but again, I think that's unsustainable. And potentially long-term, maybe Draymond, like Clay, also comes off the bench. And maybe we have a position where the starting 5 actually includes all of Pods, JK, and TJD. Which means they're not going to do anything this season. Like, if that was all of a sudden to happen in the next few games, like, that's not going to happen. Sorry, that's not going to make them do anything. You're not going to be anyone in the playoffs with 3 guys, 2 rookies starting and a guy in his 3rd year who's 21 years of age. You're not. But for the future of this team, that might be the best option. So if you were looking at a long-term managing Draymond first and foremost, but also developing your team, then maybe that's the move to actually put Draymond to the bench. I think the more reasonable thing is that the starting front court remains, and that TJD just gets his minutes upped and upped off the bench to the point where he's playing at least 25 minutes a game off the bench, kind of like Clay, and that's kind of been happening anyway, because the Warriors have obviously reduced their rotation here to 8-9 guys. Although Moses Moody got some run in the first half, and I think if Wiggins is going to be non-existent like he is, then Moody can take some of Wiggs' minutes, absolutely. But on the TJD point, I think he should be playing 25 plus minutes, regardless of whether it's starting or off the bench. And I don't know. I just think, is there a way that if Wiggins is going to be this non-existent, you could play JK at the 3, Draymond at the 4, TJD at the 5? Real lack of spacing there. Real lack of 3-point shooting there. Absolutely. And I think in that lineup, you'd really definitely need Clay in for Pods to give you that 3-point shooting. It's potentially no different, though, to what they were doing at the start of the season when they had Wiggs, Green, Loon. Is that what you could do? And I was actually looking through all the 5-man lineups for the Warriors this season, and I got to page 8 and lineups that had played 2 or 3 minutes together this season, and I stopped because I couldn't find that lineup. And so I'm assuming it's either a lineup that hasn't been used at all, which is most likely, or it's a lineup that's played less than 2 or 3 minutes, because that's where I got to when I was searching through it. Steph, Clay, JK, Draymond, TJD. Maybe try it. Maybe try it for a couple of minutes. See what happens. Because what I will tell you is the Steph, Clay, Wiggins, Draymond, TJD 5-man lineup. Very small sample size of 7 minutes in 4 games, I think, this season. 7 minutes. But they have a 61 net rating in 7 minutes. And so, could you use that more? Or do you utilize the lineup with JK there instead of Wiggs? I think it's worth a look because the Warriors are still trying to search, still trying to find what they could possibly, what their best combination is. And they've been unable to do that. And we thought that this Steph, Pods, Wiggs, JK, Draymond was it. It started off really well. And now I think, opposition teams are starting to key into, hey, we can bog this team down offensively if we can lock Steph up, if we can try to find a way to limit Kuminga. Then Podziemski and Draymond are non-scoring threats at the moment. And that's exactly the same issue the Warriors had with Draymond and Loon. So, interested to see what happens. Warriors obviously got the completely injury-ravaged Grizzlies. No excuses for this game. Like, just win the game and win the game by 10 plus. Should be 15, 20 plus, if I'm being brutally honest. So I'll finish up there. Thank you very much for listening, guys. Enjoy the game tonight. If you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel already, that would be greatly appreciated. You can follow me at POC252. That's POK252 on X or Twitter. You can follow us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. I'm actually off to Melbourne in the next few hours, so I'll be away for the weekend going over to watch some footy. So looking forward to that. Have a few beers with a few mates that I'm going over with. So, looking forward to that. And it probably means I won't be able to do another podcast till I'll take my laptop with me because I have to do writing work and stuff like that, which means that if something huge happens, then maybe I'll do a podcast over there without the microphone. But otherwise, I probably won't be able to do a podcast till the weekend, late weekend, Saturday, Sunday kind of thing. So other than that, guys, have a very enjoyable week ahead.